Welcome back. On today's show, From Fear to Freedom, we've been discussing rational and irrational fears.
Joining us in the studio is Dr. Rita Santos, cognitive behavioral psychotherapist. Welcome, Rita.
Hi.
How are you?
Good to have you with us.
I'm okay. How are you?
So, you specialize in anxiety. So, for you, what do you think is the difference between rational and irrational fears?
It's a very good question. I think you pretty much nailed the answer already with the conversation you had between the three of you. I would say that irrational fear is a fear that is not, we tend to call it irrational, we don't understand it, but it's actually quite helpful in a way. Let's say if you have a spider that you find that can be very dangerous for yourself and you see it in the corner, your brain is going to take all the necessary steps for you to defend yourself and survive, basically. So you find it irrational because you don't understand it, because it's just a small little spider.
Right. Right.
Okay, but in terms of our evolutionary history and all of that, somehow our brain has recorded that those things can be quite dangerous to us. Okay, so the only thing our brain is pretty much kind of lighting for, waking up for, is danger. Okay, so as a human being, one of our priorities is going to be to survive, basically. So we're going to have a bit of a reaction that sounds a bit irrational and all of that. Now, that sounds all very good if we're talking about a tarantula, or if we understand if it's a tiny little spider in the corner, we're going to say it's very irrational. As you were saying, it comes from, or you were saying, it comes from inside, so it feels really real. So if you top that up with some experiences that you have had with spiders that haven't been very good, or I think you were mentioning if you have witnessed someone actually being quite scared of spiders themselves, like mommy screaming around when she saw a spider in the ceiling, and all of that's going to be reinforced in terms of how your brain remembers things. Seems quite irrational, right?
Talking about social anxiety, in your experience, how do you believe people can overcome social anxiety?
How can people overcome social anxiety? It's not easy. And actually, it's an important thing. So that takes me to just a little bit on the previous question about what is normal anxiety or anxiety in a way. So you tend to anticipate things as well. So it's not just about having something in front of you, but it's about thinking of what could happen. And that happens a lot with social anxiety. So people that do what you are doing, what I'm doing here today, if they're speaking to an audience and all of that, they most of the time anticipating what could happen. Are they going to be judged? Are they going to perform well? What's going to happen? And that is terrifying. Now, the anxiety is actually really good because it helps you perform better, so you are more alert. So it is okay to be a bit anxious, and it's good that people understand that anxiety is just a bit of a problem when it starts really impacting with your life, so you're not able to do things. Okay, so when you really avoid things to a great extent. How you overcome it? Pretty much by start doing it, by start facing your fears, get some knowledge about it. But as you were saying, all of this about knowledge, very good, but yes, in my opinion and from what we know, not entirely sufficient. You need to experience things differently. So you can know about it, but you also need to feel differently about something. So if we're talking about the rat, that all of you kind of reacted a bit, I could convince you here and I could be very persuasive that they are really nice little things, and I do it with a face obviously, and I could be very, very persuasive, as I was saying, and you would get out of here saying, oh, let's get one as a pet, and it's going to be very nice. But if one got in the door, we would all of us jump, because our experience with the rat didn't really change. So basically what I'm trying to say is about the knowledge, but it's also about going out there and learn about your anxiety. So what your anxiety is telling to tell you, what it is all about, what actually can happen, what are actually people thinking about you rather than your perception of what can happen and is happening. So it's actually a possibility. People do it. They're very successful at it. But it's hard work.
Very interesting what she was mentioning, because I could relate to what you were saying previously. You were saying that in order for someone to overcome social anxiety, and a good way to start is going out there, started something, pushing yourself a little bit forward. And I can remember that because I used to be very shy, this was something every time, oh, is there anyone who'd like to say anything? I would already, you know, put myself back, like not me. Even if I had, even if I had, I would keep to myself. And when I start thinking, you know, but I can't do that. Why? I think getting the knowledge, where it's coming from, is not rational. And this was one thing that I would start doing. I would, you know, who has something to say? Me, you know.
It is very true. It becomes complicated when it's actually a disorder, when a problem, someone develops a serious problem with anxiety, and it starts really taking over your life. So, you know, I could give you endless examples, but some people are scared of speaking in public or giving a presentation because at some point, potentially, they were going through some stressful things in their lives. They were sweating, they were doing the presentation, got this idea that sweating comes across in a very bad way, and now they really believe they sweat a lot and they cannot face any kind of audience whatsoever. And why I can give you an example is a lot of people start using several layers of clothes so people cannot see their sweat. Now that we're sitting here, we don't have an anxiety problem, we can see that that is just going to make people sweat even more. And you get into the self-fulfilling prophecies that you were talking about before. But you cannot see that. What you can see is that you're doing everything you can to control how you come across, and that's the only way you have of actually going out there and having the courage to stand up in front of people. It's actually really debilitating when anxiety takes over your life. It's a fascinating emotion because you need it to survive, as you were talking about, but it can debilitate you to a great extent. But yes, it's possible to overcome it.
That's great news.
I wanted to take a deeper dive into people's cognitive behaviour. You know, because sometimes we talk about these fears, like, oh, a spider or a mouse. You know, I actually work with somebody who has a real fear of people, and it's gotten to the point where sometimes you just can't get him out of his house over the weekend just because you think, I can't face people. And, you know, when does it get to that point where you think, you know what, this has gone a little bit too far? And how do these patterns that we have, because we all suffer from a little bit of fear, how do you know when it's gone too far, and how does it affect people day to day? And you think, you know, like maybe it's a friend or family member and you think, I need to maybe step in and help, and how can we help?
It's difficult to help family and friends.
Right.
But you know, just being there, listen, and actually being supportive, try to challenge it a bit. It's probably not a bad idea. I mean. But how do you get there? It's a bit of $1 million question. We don't always have an answer for all of this, but repetition tends to be one of the things. So people go through several experiences. They are associated with stress, with some physical things that you feel that are very unpleasant. You link the two together. But it's a lot related on how you think about it. And what do you make out of it? So the anticipation, the worrying about the outcome, the future I was talking about, you guys were talking about before. So what's going to happen next? What are the consequences? And people get really involved in all of that. So if this person you're talking about starts being scared of people because of what they can do to them or how they come across, I don't know the case. Now they start avoiding seeing people, so they really never get any evidence that maybe people think differently of them or that they can cope differently, or actually they can get satisfactory experiences out of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah.
So you get again in a bit of a cycle of withdrawing, and as you were saying as well, getting to the familiar, staying in the familiar is very easy in a familiar place. So by withdrawing, you engage in being in your safe place. And even if it feels quite bad, it's quite familiar.
Yeah, exactly.
And anxiety again takes over. So suddenly, even if you didn't control the problem itself, you controlled what you feel inside and that turmoil you have in terms of your physiological sensations, basically. It's quite debilitating. I don't know if I'm answering the question.
No, it does. You know, you're talking and I'm thinking, a question I get asked a lot is, are you able to do it alone? Because this advice is great and people are watching at home. And I know some people are probably looking at you and thinking, okay, that sounds great and I'd love to do it. And then it's like tomorrow you face that fear and it's like, oh my goodness, because you've learned that behaviour, you've lived with it for so long. Is it really possible for someone to sort of pull themselves out of a rut, if you like, by themselves? By just training themselves to think differently? Or do they need help from someone professional or maybe a family member or a friend? You know, because I'm just listening to you, I'm thinking, yeah, people are probably thinking, how can I change something that I've done, which is familiar to me for so many years? How can I then start to train myself to be different?
Well, I would dare saying that if the anxiety you experience is quite mild and you haven't had it for too long, it's been a recent kind of problem, you can potentially help yourself by being quite clear about it, try to be quite reflective about it, what is happening, what changed, what can I do differently, all of that. If your anxiety is quite moderate to severe, the anxiety is not going to allow you to have that clarity. Okay, because as I was saying before, your brain is going to be pretty much on that place of danger and you need to survive and protect yourself and do everything you can to cope the best you can, basically. So it's going to be a bit difficult to be able to do that on your own. So there's nothing wrong about seeking some help either. Anxiety is a normal emotion, so what is done in therapy is, is helping people to manage it better, is not to get rid of it. Without it, we actually can die. You know, if you have a car running towards you in the street and you don't have that helpful fear we were talking about to actually run away, you can actually die. So having anxiety to an extent is very helpful. So it's okay.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask because before, let's say many years ago, we were not born, but we wouldn't hear so much about that anxiety, depression, and so many things. But do you think this is more to do with today's life or lifestyle? It brings more anxiety, more kind of pressure on people's life, or you believe that people used to suffer from that even decades before?
I think it's always been there. There's more awareness of it. There's more research. We have words for it. We have names for it. We have models. We have treatments. We have research. Because, I would say, before 50s, there was not a lot there for anyone in terms of mental health. And you had a big boom with medication. So instead of lobotomies, like things being drilled in your brain and stuff like that, you started having some medication to take, which is fantastic. And after that, therapy started kind of evolving. So I think he has been there because it's a very primal, primitive emotion for human beings. But I also think, as you were saying, that lifestyle has some impact on it. And we have some research that shows that people that live in towns like London suffer more from anxiety than people that live in the coast and have different kind of stresses in their life. So I guess the speed in which we live our lives, the worries, the unknown that you mentioned here is so important in terms of anxiety. All of those things contribute for, I guess, to increase the vulnerability of all of us. We are more vulnerable to actually experience that. We don't really have time to think about things much.
Right. Yeah. So just wanted to ask, some people's anxiety develops or becomes like a phobia. So as you also deal with phobias, how do you go about treating people that suffer from phobia?
It's very interesting. So that takes me to, I guess, one question that you were asking me before in terms of how do we think about these things and the behavior. So people, in terms of anxiety and fear, we tend to overestimate what's going to happen. So we tend to think about it in a really tough way, let's say catastrophic, so it's the worst. So it's like, again, if we pick up on the spider or on the snake, it's going to kill me. That's what it's going to jump, it's going to hurt me, I'm going to die. So we tend to overestimate what's going to happen, okay? Now, the problem with all of that is that we also underestimate our ability to cope with it.
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's the really tricky recipe there. So it's not just that it's going to be the worst thing in the whole world, it's also that I cannot deal with it. I don't have the tools, I don't know what to do it. Okay? So because of that, then we engage in a lot of behaviors like avoidance. I don't want to see it, and I don't want to do anything about it. Or if I have to be in contact with it, I'm going to run away as fast as I can. I'm going to make this very short. So by avoiding it or escaping and all those things that we put into place, we never really see that the spider actually is more afraid of us than we are of the spider.
Yeah.
So there's never really any disconfirmation. Do you see what I mean? So, and the reason why it is important to do this with a bit of help is that you're retraining your brain in a way. And we know these days that the center of fear in the brain, which is called amygdala, can actually learn to do things differently. So we're readjusting it. So that's very clear in phobias. So phobia is a very intense response to an object or a situation. It's very circumscribed. It's just one thing. Right? Whereas other anxiety problems like social anxiety can be a lot about a lot of things. So it tends to be very intense, very irrational. I've treated phobias of cats many times.
Oh, well, yeah. You probably might be seeing me then.
Dealt with people, for example, very scared of kittens, but not lions or tigers or all the cats.
That's her.
That's me. I'm not. Yeah, that's me.
So very rational. How you do it? You can actually do it in about 3 hours.
Oh well.
There you go.
There you go.
So I can give you. It's very interesting. I've done phobias of Santa Claus, boots. Kind of wearing boots, think that you're going to suffocate with the Z, because very interesting. Cotton, eggs, buttons. Height's very popular.
Oh, thank you so much. I think we could clarify so many questions we have in mind. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Well, we are going to take a short break, but don't go away, as we will be back with more from Fear to Freedom and Fearless Style with Jessica Ann.